What if I told you one of the greatest RPGs of all time was buried on the PlayStation, hidden beneath the shadow of Final Fantasy, and most people completely missed it? Vagrant Story is a cinematic masterpiece, a storytelling triumph, and probably the boldest thing Square ever released on the PS1. But why did it disappear into obscurity? And is it still worth playing today? Let's talk about the strange, beautiful, and brutally overlooked world of Vagrant Story. Before we jump into today's video, quick question. You ever download a classic gem from a totally questionable site that looked like it time-traveled straight out of 2003? You know, pop-ups everywhere, weird file names, and that sinking feeling like, am I downloading a game or a virus? Yeah, me too. That's why I use NordVPN. It doesn't just keep your connection fast and encrypted, it blocks malicious websites, trackers, and protects you from malware while you're out there. How can I put this? Looking for gems. With servers in over 60 countries, you can unlock games, videos, and even sweet regional deals you'd never see otherwise. And the best part? One subscription covers up to 10 devices: PC, phone, tablet, maybe even that dusty old laptop from your emulator days. It's super easy to set up, and using my special link below, you get 73% off plus 3 extra months free. And if for some reason you're not into it, no worries. Within 30 days, you get 100% of your money back. No questions asked. So stop rolling the dice. One sketchy download or fried motherboard could cost more than 20 years of NordVPN. Click the link in the description and pinned comment right now and lock in your deal today. When development kicked off back in early 1998, Yasumi Matsuno had one goal in mind: build an RPG that didn't look, play, or feel like anything else on the market. This wasn't going to be another clone of what worked in the past. No flashy callbacks to Final Fantasy, no cookie-cutter tropes. He wanted something raw, something personal, something bold. And that's exactly what Vagrant Story became. It was the kind of game that didn't chase trends. While other titles were trying to be the next big blockbuster, Vagrant Story was quietly crafting something more intimate. Think less big-budget action movie, more art house film that sticks with you long after the credits roll. It's smaller in scale, but packed with soul. Matsuno, already known for strategy-heavy games like Tactics Ogre and Final Fantasy Tactics, decided to take a hard left turn with this one. He stepped out of his comfort zone to create something entirely new. No grid-based battles, no party management, just a single protagonist in a tightly woven world with mechanics unlike anything players were used to. He started with a small team, about 20 developers, which eventually grew to 50 as the vision got bigger. But even as the team grew, the goal stayed the same: make a game that breaks rules, challenges the player, and respects their intelligence. This wasn't designed to be a crowd pleaser. It was for the hardcore fans, for the ones who actually enjoy figuring stuff out, and for the ones who want depth over instant gratification. If you came in expecting another Final Fantasy or something cinematic like Metal Gear Solid, this wasn't for you. The appeal is different, like comparing sushi to barbecue, or a jazz club to a rock concert. Each has its own flavor, but trying to judge one by the standards of the other completely misses the point. Also, trying to slap a label on the Vagrant Story is like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. It's not just an action game or a traditional RPG or a dungeon crawler. It pulls elements from all of them and ends up becoming something else entirely. It's a game that plays by its own rules, blending combat, puzzle solving, strategy, and storytelling into one weirdly compelling mix that doesn't care about fitting into a box. Back when Square was dominating the JRPG world with stuff like Final Fantasy and Xenogears, they weren't really diving all in on fully 3D environments. Those games relied on pre-rendered backgrounds or sprite-based characters to work around the brutal hardware limits of the PlayStation. But with Vagrant Story, things were different. Yasumi Matsuno pushed the team to go fully 3D. That decision set off a chain reaction of technical headaches. Memory was a constant problem. Everything had to be squeezed into tight limitations. Characters, environments, animations, every polygon counted. Because of that, more than half the original story had to be cut just to make the game playable. Entire characters were scrapped, and mechanics like AI companions for Ashley never made it past the early stages. Everything had to be trimmed to keep the frame rate stable and the game running smoothly. Even the design of the characters was a battle. The artist had to decide where to focus the most detail. Should the face be sharper or the fingers more defined? Should the silhouette be broad or slim? The hardware just couldn't handle it all, so compromises were made at every step. Back in the day, most PS1 games had to work around serious hardware limitations, but what the team behind Vagrant Story pulled off was nothing short of insane. They were working with a strict limit of just 3,000 polygons on screen to keep the game running at 30 frames per second. That might not sound like much now, but at the time, it was like trying to paint a masterpiece with a single brush. Every character, every map, everything had to fit inside that tiny polygon budget. And when too many models showed up at once, they had to get creative, making tough decisions about what details to keep and what to cut. They had to carefully balance each part of the character models. Face shapes, arm length, finger thickness, waist proportions, even the flow of hair. If one thing was off, the whole look would break. And it wasn't just about making things pretty, these models also needed to be functional for animation. That meant building them in a way that motion designers could work with easily, without breaking the frame rate. What's wild is that despite all these limits, Vagrant Story turned out stunning. Like, seriously, it still holds up. The animations are smooth, the environments are packed with detail, and the whole thing has this moody, dark comic book vibe that feels super intentional. The architecture alone feels like it was ripped straight out of an old European painting, full of crumbling cathedrals, shadowy corridors, and stone streets that feel alive with history. The inspiration came from Saint-Emilion, a medieval town in France, and you can really feel that in every corner of Le Monde. The team actually traveled there, studied the scenery, and then translated that Gothic sacred atmosphere into digital form with shocking detail. The lighting plays a huge role too. There's this heavy use of shadows and contrast that gives everything a dark, gritty tone. No fancy real-time lighting, just clever texture work that fakes the effects so well you barely notice. It's that smart design that makes everything feel cinematic, almost like you're moving through a living comic book. What ties it all together is the art direction from Akihiko Yoshida. If you've played Tactics Ogre or Final Fantasy Tactics, his style will hit you right away. But here, it's been cranked up a notch. It's rougher, moodier, and sharper. Even the little things like the font choice and dialogue boxes feel on-brand. It perfectly matches the tone of Vagrant Story, setting the foundation for what he'd later bring to Final Fantasy XII and XIV. But what really sets Vagrant Story apart is how it tells its story. There's something special about the way it's all directed, like every cutscene was crafted with the precision of a filmmaker. The pacing is tight, the camera work is bold, and nothing ever feels wasted. It doesn't just look cinematic, it feels like you're inside a dark, moody graphic novel that somehow came to life on a PlayStation. Matsuno didn't just want to entertain with flashy visuals or over-the-top moments. He wanted to build tension, drop just enough detail to keep you thinking, and then hit you with something that makes the whole scene click. His approach to storytelling is subtle but incredibly effective. The dialogue flows like poetry, but never gets too heavy. Characters don't just blurt out how they feel. There's weight behind their words, and often what's not said is more powerful than what is. There's a reason people still talk about the writing in Vagrant Story. It doesn't hold your hand or spell things out. You're dropped into a world full of conflict, mystery, and political games, and it trusts you to keep up. That's rare, especially in games from that era, where exposition dumps were the norm. Here, the writing respects the player's intelligence, and that makes a huge difference. If you're enjoying the deep dive so far and want to see more videos like this, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps a ton. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. We've got plenty more retrospectives, hidden gems, and underrated classics coming your way. Thanks for hanging out and watching this far. Seriously. Let's keep going. One of the most underrated things about Vagrant Story is just how damn good the English localization is. And that's not something you hear a lot when talking about games from that era. Most localizations back then were either clunky, dry, or just straight up weird. But not this one. What we got here is a masterclass in writing, all thanks to Alexander O. Smith. The original Japanese version used pretty standard modern language. Nothing wrong with that, it told the story just fine, but Smith took it up several notches. He rewrote the dialogue using this rich, almost Shakespearean tone that perfectly matched the medieval, gothic vibe of the game. And he didn't do it just to sound fancy. It was a deliberate move to lock the world into a specific mood, dark, mysterious, and full of weight. This guy didn't just translate lines word for word. He injected personality into every sentence. Even minor characters sound like they've got history, like they've lived in that world for years. It's poetic, but never pretentious. Dramatic, but never cheesy. It makes the entire atmosphere feel more immersive and more alive. It all starts with Ashley Riot, a top agent from the VKP, dropped into a burning estate in the middle of a full-blown war between a cult, a religious militia, and a suspicious nobleman. And this isn't your basic good versus evil setup. It's a tangled mess of corruption, ancient magic, and personal demons that slowly unravel as you dig deeper. As Ashley chases down Sydney, the mysterious leader of the Molenkamp cult, you get thrown into the ruins of Leamond, a cursed city buried under centuries of dark secrets. But this mission isn't just about stopping a villain. It's also about uncovering the real motives of the people pulling the strings behind the scenes, including a cardinal who's way too interested in forbidden power. And as the pieces start falling into place, Ashley's own dark past gets pulled into the spotlight. The deeper he goes, the more he's forced to face what he's done and who he really is. Everything unfolds like a noir thriller mixed with a gothic fantasy. There's no big world map or happy little towns here. It's all focused, tight, and loaded with atmosphere. And even though the original story was supposed to be much bigger, what we got still feels complete. That's a huge credit to how well this thing was written and directed. Nothing drags, nothing feels half-baked, every twist hits hard, and the pacing keeps you locked in. There's a weight to every scene. Whether it's political scheming, cryptic dialogue, or a brutal confrontation, the game respects your attention and never dumbs things down. Combat in Vagrant Story hits different. It's not your typical button-mashing RPG where you just swing a sword and watch the numbers fly. This game wants you to slow down, think, and plan every move like you're defusing a bomb. And yeah, for some people, that's going to be a deal-breaker. The real challenge here isn't about fast reflexes or twitch skills. It's about learning how the systems talk to each other. You've got blade types, enemy classes, elemental affinities, buffs, debuffs, positioning, timing, everything matters. The game doesn't exactly hold your hand either. No flashy tutorials, no big glowing hints. If you don't take the time to understand it, you're going to get crushed. Now here's the thing. All that complexity is brilliant once it clicks, but the road to get there is kind of rough. The menus are clunky, switching weapons takes too long, and combat animations can really drag. Sometimes you spend more time prepping than actually fighting. That breaks the pace a bit, especially when you're coming off one of those super cinematic cutscenes that had you hyped. When you face an enemy, the game slows everything down, giving you a chance to think. A dome-shaped grid pops up around Ashley showing the range of your current weapon. If your target's inside that zone, you can hit it, but that's just the beginning. Enemies aren't just blobs with health bars. They've got individual hit zones like head, arms, legs, torso, even tails or wings, and each one reacts differently to your attacks. Some parts are more vulnerable than others, and what you're using matters even more. There's a whole rock-paper-scissors system with weapon types. You've got edged, blunt, and piercing damage. It's also about uncovering the real motives of the people pulling the strings behind the scenes, including a cardinal who's way too interested in forbidden power. Early on, you unlock an ability called Analyze. It lets you scan enemies and see what they're weak to. Maybe you're fighting a knight and see he's got a weak spot for blunt damage. That's your cue to swap out your sword for a mace and go to town. But things don't stay that simple for long. Later enemies have mixed resistances, so one part might be weak to fire, while another is strong against it. Some will shrug off edged damage to the chest, but take big hits if you go for the arms. You're constantly having to adapt your gear and aim based on what you're facing. And, yeah, elemental stuff comes into play too. If you're packing gems, you can slot them into your weapons to boost fire, ice, or other elemental damage. It adds another layer of strategy, especially in late-game fights where a monster might resist fire on its head, but take heavy damage from it on its legs. Magic also is a core part of surviving the deeper layers of the game. You'll find these things called grimoires scattered around, and every time you use one, Ashley permanently learns a new spell. No grinding, no complicated menus, just find it, use it, and boom, it's yours for good. Most of the offensive spells look cool, but honestly, the real power lies in the buffs and debuffs. If you ignore them, you're basically playing on hard mode. Buffing yourself increases your hit rate and damage, and dropping debuffs on enemies makes them way easier to deal with. It's not just about dealing more damage, it's about controlling the fight. Before stepping into any new area in Vagrant Story, preparation isn't just helpful, it's survival. If you're not equipped for what's ahead, things go south real fast. You will want to make sure you're dealing all 3 core damage types: edged, blunt, and piercing. Most enemies are resistant to at least one, but weak to another. Then there's the class system. Enemies fall into categories like human, beast, undead, phantom, dragon, and evil. As you use weapons on these different classes, they start adapting, getting bonuses when used against certain types. But there's a catch. While a weapon might get stronger against one class, it can actually get weaker against others. Older guides will tell you to build 3 specific loadouts: one for humans and phantoms, one for beasts and dragons, and one for undead and evil types. And yeah, that's solid advice if you want to be efficient. But honestly, in most cases, blade type and element matter more than class. So don't overthink it too much. Just make sure your weapons are hitting the right weak spots. Another layer that makes Vagrant Story so unique is the risk system. Every time you land an attack, your risk level goes up. But here's the catch: high risk means you're easier to hit, your attacks start missing more often, and your defense basically goes out the window. It forces you to think before spamming combos. You can use items to lower risk, but they're not unlimited, so wasting them early can come back to bite you during the tougher fights. To balance that out, you've got chain abilities. These are timed button presses that let you stack up attacks as long as your rhythm is on point. It's satisfying when you pull it off, and depending on what abilities you equip, you can deal more damage, steal magic points, recover health, or inflict nasty effects like silence or paralysis. There's also a whole system of defensive chains that can block or reflect enemy attacks if you've got good timing. But the real fun for me comes from break arts. These are special moves tied to your weapon type, and you unlock them after getting enough kills with a specific kind of weapon. They hit hard, have a wide area of effect, and don't raise your risk. The trade-off is they drain your health, so you've got to use them smart. Just keep in mind, break arts can change the type of damage, even if your weapon looks like it should deal something else. But you won't get very far if you're still swinging that same rusty sword from the first hour of the game. To stay ahead, you need to understand how crafting works. It all comes down to mixing the right blade with the right grip. You'll find parts in chests, loot them from enemies, or break down your gear to get the materials you need. And make sure to match your blade type with grip that actually boosts that specific kind of damage as much as possible. A weapon made of Damascus hits way harder than one made of bronze. Same goes for armor and shields. Better materials mean better defense, simple as that. Some grips also come with gem slots, and these are super useful. They let you add elemental damage or boost accuracy, and that can turn a decent weapon into something deadly. You can also fuse weapons together to make stronger ones, but only if you combine the same type. Swords with swords, axes with axes. Mix them wrong and you'll just make junk. And managing your gear in Vagrant Story can be a real test of patience. You've got limited inventory space, so naturally, you'll want to store your extra weapons and armor in chests found in workshops. Every time you use one of these chests, you're hit with long load times and clunky menu navigation that seriously breaks the flow of the game. The system forces you to go through multiple steps just to move one item. Pick it, confirm it, save your game, and then wait. If you forget to save, the item doesn't even stay stored. It's one of those reminders that this game was pushing the PlayStation way past its limits. And it's not just the storage. You're constantly pausing the action to dig through layers of menus, swap gear, or wait out slow spell animations. Enemies love casting magic too, so even when you try to avoid combat and just move through a room, they'll drag you into fights that take forever to finish. All of this gives the game a kind of stop-and-go rhythm that can feel frustrating, especially when you just want to stay in the moment. But here's the thing. Despite all that, the systems buried under this slow pace are genuinely deep and rewarding. The customization, the tactical combat, the way everything connects, it all adds up to something way ahead of its time. Yeah, the pacing stumbles, but the ambition behind it is undeniable. Exploring in Vagrant Story feels like digging through ancient ruins where every room hides a secret. There's treasure tucked away behind locked doors, and you'll need specific keys or sigils to open them. Sometimes you'll have to backtrack to places you've already visited, but the game eventually gives you a teleport system that saves a ton of time and makes it way more manageable. Some areas are only accessible in New Game Plus, so if you're the type who wants 100% completion, just know that it'll take more than one playthrough. Still, the map makes all of this way easier. It's detailed, super clear, and actually tells you what you need to unlock each area. It's easily one of the best maps you'll find in an old-school RPG. Platforming shows up now and then, and it's, alright, not terrible, but not great either. The real fun comes from the puzzles. Most of them revolve around moving blocks to reach high places Ashley can't jump to normally. Early on they're simple, but by the end they'll really make you stop and think. Just make sure you turn on the option that keeps puzzles solved after you complete them. Otherwise, every time you leave and re-enter a room, you'll have to do it all over again. The soundtrack in Vagrant Story hits different. It doesn't just sit in the background, it shapes the entire atmosphere. Hitoshi Sakimoto, who had already nailed it with Final Fantasy Tactics, came in with a familiar style at first. But right away, Yasumi Matsuno shut that down. He didn't want anything light or heroic. He wanted something heavy, weird, and unsettling. Something that feels more like the X-Files than Indiana Jones. That shift changed everything. Sakimoto reworked the entire vibe, diving into ambient scores and eerie tones that matched the game's darker, more mature energy. What came out of that process is one of the most unique soundtracks in any JRPG. It's chaotic, experimental, and constantly keeps you on edge. One minute it's soft and haunting, the next it feels like something terrible is about to happen. It's unpredictable, and that's exactly why it works so well. Marketing-wise, Vagrant Story didn't get the spotlight it deserved. Square was too busy riding the wave of Final Fantasy hype, especially with Final Fantasy IX just around the corner. Most of the attention and budget went there. Meanwhile, Vagrant Story got a low-key rollout. A couple of trailers, some magazine features, and a demo disc for curious players, but nothing close to a full-blown push. The box art didn't exactly scream must-play either, especially in North America. It was moody, abstract, and a bit too subtle for store shelves packed with flashy covers. The game also launched with almost no explanation of what it actually was, which made it hard to sell to casual fans. You had to already be into weird, experimental RPGs to even give it a shot. Looking back, it's no wonder the game flew under the radar, even though the quality was absolutely there. In terms of sales, Vagrant Story didn't exactly break records. In Japan, it did fairly well out the gate, moving around 100,000 copies in its first week and eventually selling over 250,000 total. But in North America and Europe, the numbers were a lot more modest. It barely crossed 100,000 in the US, which was a letdown for a game carrying the Square name at the peak of the PlayStation era. Part of that comes down to the timing. It dropped in 2000, right when people were already shifting focus to the upcoming PlayStation 2. Add that to the lack of marketing and the game's niche appeal, and you've got a title that just didn't hit the commercial success it deserved. It wasn't a flop, but it definitely didn't get the kind of recognition you'd expect for something this ambitious. Vagrant Story is one of those rare games that does its own thing without trying to copy anyone else. It doesn't hold your hand, it doesn't care about fitting into a genre, and it doesn't follow the usual JRPG playbook. No towns to rest in, no world map to explore, no chatty NPCs giving out side quests. Instead, what you get is a dark, intense, and laser-focused journey through a cursed city filled with danger, secrets, and some of the best storytelling ever packed into a game. From the very first moment, it's clear this was built with care. The visuals push the PlayStation way past what you'd expect. Every texture, every shadow, every bit of architecture feels handcrafted to match the mood. It's all gritty, gothic, and full of atmosphere. The music and sound design pull you deeper, setting the tone perfectly for every scene. The story is what really carries it. It's not loud or flashy, but it's smart, mysterious, and builds slowly, letting you piece things together through subtle moments and sharp writing. The game respects your intelligence, and that alone makes it stand out. The puzzles are clever, the map is actually useful, and the fast travel system saves a ton of time. Once you start to understand how combat and equipment work, it all clicks. There's depth here. Most games don't even try to reach. Now, yeah, the battles can feel a little slow sometimes. There's a stop-and-go rhythm that takes getting used to. But when you look at everything else this game nails, that trade-off is worth it. If you're into deep mechanics, layered storytelling, and games that challenge you to think, Vagrant Story is a must-play. What about you? Have you played Vagrant Story, or is this one of those titles you've always meant to check out but never got around to? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.